Related to this subject is information actually on the Department of Labor website that says they will soon, in fact, they say May of next year. Now, when the government says they're going to do some, issue regulations the next month, I tend to, I'll believe it when I see it, because they are often overly optimistic in terms of their timing. But at this point, the Department of Labor says that next month, in May of 2010, they will issue some regulations that will really, for the first time, compel the service providers to provide this information to you. So that's the disconnect I'm talking about. If you're on the administration side or plan sponsor side, you're required to report the information on Schedule C, but the service providers are not required to give it quite yet. Well, once these regulations become finalized and in effect, they'll be compelled to provide that information to you, not just really on a year-by-year basis, but even at the time, any time that you would contract with a service provider, they are going to need to disclose to the plan sponsor what their compensation arrangements are with mutual funds and so forth. And as well as like float information too is part of the deal. You as a plan sponsor don't think about the income that providers might make on the float of checks, but that's another form of indirect compensation which when you should be asking your service providers about. How much compensation do they make off of the float from the time that from the time that they issue a check, let's say a distribution check to a plan participant, till when the checks are cashed? I mean, that's some additional compensation that flows back to the service provider, which they are supposed to be, if asked, telling you about, so it can be reported on the Schedule C. And under these new regulations, or these regulations, if they're passed, when they're passed, I should say when, it's not a matter of if, but when, they'll be requiring them to provide to the plan sponsors, and with more of a penalty then too if those regulations are violated. Then even though those providers themselves are not plan fiduciaries, it would essentially be a prohibited transaction for them to be providing any services to the plan without providing that kind of information. So it's a way for the Department of Labor to get at them. So there were some proposed regulations that were issued in that area before, but just proposed, not effective. And again, with the changeover of administration from Bush to Obama, those were kind of frozen. So there's nothing really in place now until now finally they're going to get around to putting those regulations in place. And as you can imagine, the financial industry has kind of pushed back on those as much as they can. So that's, I think, one reason for why there's been some delay with regulations in that area. Yes? Labor deems it part of the fiduciary obligation of any plan sponsor to get that information, yes, regardless of number of employees. Now, strictly speaking, though, that Schedule C has to be attached to the large plans for the large plan, 5500s, more than 100 participants. So the fiduciary plan sponsor should ask the question, even for small plans, but not necessarily have to put it on the 5500 unless they're a large plan. But just to have the information and to know about it is important, just to, again, make sure that you're working with a service provider that's doing not just a good job for you, but that you're getting good value for. It's all related. If they're getting a lot of indirect compensation that you weren't aware of before, are you getting good service for that compensation? And do you feel like you're just getting overpaid? You've got more ability to compare service providers to service providers in terms of what they're getting compensated if you have that information available to you, and if you don't ask the question, you're not going to know about it. So even small plans should find that out, even if they don't have to report it. Oh, this change here, the regulatory change, I believe that this regulatory change, yes, won't be limited just to the large plans. That this regulatory change, when it comes into play, will apply to any provider of services to a qualified plan, not just to the large plans, yes. So this whole issue of 401k fees, we've been talking about it for a number of years, but I think we'll continue to talk about it for quite a long time too, because it's an area that's a lot of regulation, litigation, and so forth, and responsibility on plan sponsors to be aware of what fees are and so forth. So it's probably going to be a standing agenda item here for a while. Okay.